My gosh. So I learned so much about marketplace and then co-selling. And so, I just I love that we get such an expansive um learning knowledge here in all of the women in cloud experiences. Now we're going to ice that cake, really, because Gillian Muessig is, I'm sorry if I mispronounced your last name. So Gillian, when you come up here, say it right for me. But she is the managing director of MastersFund, the CEO of Outlines Venture Group. She's the co-founder of Moz. She's a host of two podcasts, the VC Confidential and CEO Coach. I mean, you're a rock star. I was online looking you up, and it was like it said something like, what's the net worth of Gillian. So I love that piece too. You're a thought leader and you speak on the benefits of gender lens investing. So you're going to tell us about understanding funding channels. Please say your last name for me correctly.
Right, it's okay. In American, it's called Muessig, and you were really close. It's almost like music.
Music, I love it. All right, so I can't wait to hear what you have to say.
I've got some slides, so I'm going to share slides, and I think someone said that I should be able to. There we go, share slide. As I said earlier this morning, Ann Kennedy and I are raising $100 million to go fund women-led technology companies. We look for diversity on the founding teams and in the management groups and so on. But we're going to talk today about getting capital for you. So it's an honor to be with you all. And I'm just here to say that, until March of 2020, you could have gotten all kinds of information from the folks who had been there before, from the guys who had raised the capital. We know women get 2%, 2.3 to be precise, last year, and it fluctuates around there. And all these folks giving you some good information and advice. And I'm telling you that as of March of 2020, they know bupkis. You are experiencing a world that no entrepreneur has had to move through, and you're doing brilliantly well in just staying alive in this environment. Now, let's talk about the VC industry as a whole, and I keep calling this conventional venture capital, all right? And I will tell you why I modify that word conventional, okay? First of all, you've probably seen a whole lot of jokes about sharks and this and that and the next thing, right? Somebody sent this to me, one of the entrepreneurs that I was chatting with, right? Protesters are criticized for looting businesses without forming a private equity firm first. Boy, that is telling, and it certainly is, if you will, COVID humor, right? Okay, so here's some venture capital by the numbers. 80% of every venture-funded company is going to fail in 5 years. And by the way, down on the bottom, you'll see links to all of this. We didn't make this stuff up. You can go check the references. 16% are not going to have an exit. And that's the only way conventional venture capital investors will get their money out. You must have an exit, a sale, or an IPO. Keep that in mind, either a sale or an IPO. A little less than 4% will have a successful exit. And a successful exit is defined as a 3x multiple or better for the investors. But VC funds are expensive investment vehicles. It costs that just to run the darn thing for 10 years. And many exceed the 10-year fund levels, and they go to 11 and 12 and 15 and so on. So the question is, if 80% die and 16% don't return anything to the fund because they don't exit, did VCs make a mistake on 96% of their investment decisions? We'd say really not. It's about the funding model. Really, 0.0006% of any company on the planet is ever going to get venture capital. These are the finest companies on the planet. And yet we keep looking at only one form of raising capital to grow a company. And this particular kind of venture of capital serves a tiny sliver of companies very well. The rest, not so much. So this is Georges Doriel. He was French-born American professor at Harvard, and he founded right? INSEAD and ARD. He was a military strategist, a Harvard educator. I mean, he's a real underachiever, right? Now, when he and his friends put this together, this first venture capital firm as we know it today, all right, he thought that 2% of the investments would pan out. They were funding innovation. Today, you might loosely call that the software that powers the next big thing. And it's why we do and we should hear again and again in the halls, Silicon Valley and New York and Boston, Chicago, whatever. We should hear it again and again. AI and IoT and AR, VR and blockchain and so on, battery technologies. These are the softwares that will power the next big thing and the human existence on planet Earth for the next 100 years. George and his friends called it funding moonshots. And we still use that terminology today. But for far too long, we've taken a hatchet to a scalpel job. It's time to look at the ways to fund different kinds of companies. This is not the capital that is designed to fund the companies that leverage that software to build the next very decent thing. It is only designed for a tiny sliver. And the process, the very investment model, is to invest in about 20 companies, burn about 18 or 19 of them, and one of them will carry the entire fund. In other words, return sufficient investment that it makes it worthwhile to remain in that fund. Okay. Let's take a look instead at your full capital stack. You have an IT stack, right? You don't use one piece of IT, you use a stack. Think about capital in the same way. You're going to need a different kind of capital to swim across this a body of water here, and a different kind of capital to get through the forest, and another one to get up those kind of plains and mountains and so on, and one more to get way over the top of those mountains, right? It's different capital at different times. Think about the entire journey of your company, not just one little piece. And fortunately, venture funding is really evolving. And I say, finally, yes. So, as soon as you've taken $1 of conventional venture capital, you've agreed to two things, among others. Right? The first is to sell your company, or in rare instances, go public, as quickly and as high a valuation as possible. The second thing you agree to is you will work at the pleasure of your board. And should your goals for how you wish to build your company and your corporate culture and all kinds of things, right, diverge from those of your funders, your investors who sit on your board, right, and that is to return capital to the fund as quickly and efficiently as possible, right, you can be replaced. Make sure you're willing to make that deal. Okay? So you'd really say, but you know, venture funded companies are the big players. These are the guys who exited the hundreds of millions and so on. Yes, rarely. Remember, less than 4% will have even a happy exit, let alone a monstrous exit. Unicorns, by their definition, are rare. And then the question is begged, are these venture funded companies really more profitable to the founders? The answer is, well, yeah, yes and no. This is my co-founder, Rand Fishkin, my eldest son. He wrote a book called Lost and Founder about this process of venture capital. I'm happy to share this slide, and I share the whole deck with everybody. But in particular, this little chart here, get a screen capture, right? If you look at consulting businesses versus product businesses, if you look at venture funding versus non-venture funding, and you have a reasonably decent exit, somewhere around 40 million bucks, right? It's a decent exit. It's not chump change, right? You're going to make a whole lot better deal if you had exited at 15 million and you owned the whole company than at 40 million, having taken on venture capital. In truth, at the end of a happy exit, most entrepreneurs will own somewhere between 8 and 12% of their own company. This is a really high bar to get to an awfully large exit to make this worth your while. Just make sure you know what you're doing. Let's take a look at some other options. Venture debt, for example, as opposed to venture equity, right? Revenue share loans, right? Folks like Lighter Capital do this, Sage Growth Capital, Founders First. Lots of companies are in this game now. This is no longer rare. You can find them by doing a simple search online. Right? You earn a certain amount of capital and you pay a percentage of last month's gross revenue or adjusted gross and so on in order to retire such a loan. Essentially what they were doing is they were taking factoring out of the manufacturing world of the 20th century. They stuck it in the 21st century with the tech companies and called it non-dilutive venture capital. They didn't pay that marketing guy enough, but it's good and it's true and it's a very reasonable option if you're already revenue positive. Okay, dividend models. Okay. Dividend models are very much like the public dividend model. As a matter of fact, my son Rand raised money on his second company, SparkToro, using a dividend model. If you go to sparktoro.com and you look at the blog or you just enter plus investment, you can find the actual investment documents right there. They're redacted to, protect whatever, but you can read them. You can see how they work. You don't have to pay a fortune for this. Right? A dividend model says you get your investors in and they become, if you will, the investment arm of your company, the finance arm of your company. And when you've used the capital to begin your process and grow, and then you get to the point of profitability and you declare dividends. Being the largest owner of stock, you get those dividends too. You can take a smaller salary. In truth, salary is the most expensive way to ever earn a living in the United States. Right? It is the highest taxed. There are all kinds of advantages to taking dividends. Royalty agreements, well, it's not exactly like this. But if you have a product that can be licensed out, same idea, you share the royalties. And then there are loans, and we call them loan sharks and things like that, right? But there are reasonable ways to get loans, and at the moment, there has never been as much government capital flowing to the general public in the United States, ever, right? Today, I would say, yeah, go look for those grants. Go look for those government loans. Check out SBA again. If you've never looked at these things, now's the time to take a look. This quantity of capital and the extraordinarily low rates make it look like cheap mortgages. It's worth taking a look. And then there are hybrid models, and that's what Ann Kennedy and I do over at the MastersFund. Here we are at VC Confidential. I think we were in Iceland when we had this discussion. But anyway, we unapologetically fund women-led and diverse teams. Right? The hybrid model is interesting in that it has elements of both pieces, and I can explain that at another time. But think of it as venture debt that is collateralized by stock. So why do we invest in women-led companies? That's kind of an important question too. Right now, we know that about 2%, 2.3, we've already talked about that in 2020, right? That's what goes to women-led companies at the Series A. That says if you are going to find a unicorn, go find them in uncrowded fields. The second thing is women on average will get an 84% lower valuation at this first major VC investment than is awarded to men. Right? 84%. If you told me 70%, I would have said, yeah, that's like salaries. We'll get there. But wow, what an advantage to an investor. They're capital efficient. Over the entire life of a conventional investment, women will raise an average of 66% less capital. That's 66% less dilution. Every time you raise capital, an investor gets diluted. Okay? They build more economic value. For every dollar invested, they create 78 cents more than that dollar. Right? Men create 31 cents. Again, it's about capital efficiency and focus. Shorter investment cycles. If you're making a conventional venture investment, folks who are listening in here, well, think about it. That's less capital tie-up time. So even in the conventional sector, women are doing better there. And finally, women-led companies return an average of 35% higher ROI. As a matter of fact, in 2016, First Round Capital reported on their previous 10-year fund that their women-led companies had returned 63% higher ROI. And one of the fellows over at Shark Tank reported that all of his returns, not some, not most, all of his returns had come from women-led companies. People are beginning to notice, but the money is not following the money. Now, in terms of conventional venture capital, I'd like to say it's not for every company. So do the good work yourself, right? What is the nature of the company you're building, right? And what are you trying to accomplish at the end of the game? right? The services business versus the product business is a good way to begin this thought process. And
Well,
really,
this is fantastic, Gillian. And what I love about it is you're talking about, just like people talk about a full stack, you're talking about this sequence stack with the funding that you get and all the different options. So I would love to sit down and spend an entire day with you about this, but unfortunately we don't have all that time. So if you would like to get into one of her think tanks, or be sure to tune into her podcast, because they are fantastic and you're going to learn a lot there, as well as just listen to what she said about finding different funding models so that you don't get attached to a ball and chain from an outdated funding consciousness that really still exists. So thank you so much, Gillian, for being here, and appreciate all of your insight and wisdom.
It's my pleasure.
If you would put in the chat, please, how people can get in contact with her so that people can follow up with you, because it's amazing what you're doing. And thank you for being here.